Welcome to the 1110 Leadership Podcast, where we tackle issues at the intersection of leadership, faith, and culture. I'm your host, Rob Shields, Vice President of Strategy at 1110 Leadership, and I'm joined by my co-host, founder and CEO of 1110 Leadership, David Spickard. Proverbs 1110 lays out a bold and countercultural vision. When the righteous prosper, the city rejoices. We're here to ask, what does it look like practically to be this type of leader? Leaders willing to invest everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive. Join us on the journey as we lean in, listen, and learn how to become Proverbs 11:10 kind of leaders. The kind of leaders that make our cities rejoice. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. For today's episode, we are going to be replaying a previous episode we recorded last year on the concept of lament and its significance in leadership. Sadly, the reality is, like we mentioned in this interview, that this is an aspect of the journey of justice that we never really move past. Brokenness is always with us, and we wanted to create a space for us to just sit with that and reflect a bit. Recently we've been diving more deeply into the first quality of a just leader, seeing the whole playing field, and really trying to paint a clear picture of what that can look like for your leadership. But inevitably, once you start to see more clearly, one of the first things we often start to notice is brokenness. That brokenness might feel new to you, but then you start to realize that it actually might have been there all along. And that can be a really sobering reality. So we thought before moving on, we'd go back to the well, so to speak, and really sit with what it means to be leaders who can lament well. This, probably more than any other concept we talk about, will feel the most foreign to the cultural landscape of leadership. They feel a bit out of place, honestly. But I do think that for people who've gotten a taste for a different path for their leadership, the 11:10 path towards cities rejoicing, wholeness, and shalom, I think there starts to develop a recognition that this idea might be at the very heart of everything we're talking about. As we follow a God who was literally called in Scripture a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. How do we start to think about how that maps onto our leadership? How does that show up in how we engage our people and our team? When is it appropriate to model this, and when isn't it? That's something we have to be really careful about being prescriptive on, because this is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and there are not really easy answers. Lament taps into our emotion, which means it can get really messy, which is why probably a lot of leaders want to steer clear of this conversation. But I'm convinced that just leaders, 11:10 leaders, leaders who leverage everything they have so that everyone around them can thrive, those are the kind of leaders who have to know how to lean into these waters and learn how to hold space for the brokenness that's all around us and inside of us. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. David, how are you doing, my friend?
We're doing well over here, Rob. Thank you. How about you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be back, excited to continue. We started pulling on some really cool threads last episode, and I think hopefully our listeners were a little relieved to say, "Oh, please don't leave us hanging here. Keep going." I hope that was the sentiment, instead of please stop. I don't want to think about managing my emotions anymore. But we're going to continue building off that foundation, and I'm excited to do that here with this episode.
Yeah, this is a challenging one. And I think both of us are coming at this not as experts at all.
No.
Which is really important, but an area where we're recognizing our need for growth. And then in particular, how this plays out in a leadership context.
Yeah, I wonder, maybe more so than any other episode we've ever done, whether some of our listeners may have clicked on it, not just because it was well titled, but because they were like, I don't even know what that is. Right. Or I'm not as even that term is just not one that I think about a lot. And so I just want to tune in because I'm curious. Right. And you promised me that you were going to keep talking about emotional intelligence. And then this word lament, what are we talking about? And so I think we recognize, David, that there's two pieces I think that are helpful to name as we frame out this episode. One is that, podcast is a very limited medium in which to have this conversation because it's so one way. But I do think that hopefully this can help tee up some conversations for our listeners who take this and maybe process this over a cup of coffee or give them some things to think about in their relational contexts. And I think the second one is that this is never going to be irrelevant. Sadly, right? There's always something in our world, in our communities, in our neighborhoods. We live in a very broken world. And so there's always something broken. And how do we respond to that? How do we respond to it, period, as people, but how do we respond to it as leaders? And what is the role of something like lament in leadership? So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you, because we talk about this just principle of just leaders know and identify with God's heart for justice. That sets up the inverse of how do we respond to injustice. And people can pick up their phone right now and just open up whatever their news app is, and you don't have to scroll down very far to get to injustice. It's in your face. It's all the time. Some of those waves are bigger than others. So a very relevant conversation, even the context of the time in which we're recording this on the cusp of the Advent season, which for Christians, right, that will practice the Christian faith, this idea of this sense of waiting for the arrival of Jesus at Christmas, in the sense of light breaking into darkness. I think that the time in which we're even having this conversation is really meaningful and interesting. So David, just give us a working definition here. When we talk about this word lament, break it down. What do we mean by it for those who may have, different levels of interaction with this term?
Yeah, well, lament is an essential ingredient of being honest in our faith. It's the sense that something's wrong, whether it's with ourselves or with the world. And through lament, we, as those who follow God, we plant seeds of hope when we're exasperated and desperate, expecting that the Lord will eventually come through in the end. It's this idea, if I were to say anything about lament, it's just being completely honest before God, and God welcoming that, God wanting that. There are three big ideas that have helped me grow in this understanding of lament, almost like 3 steps in lament that I found to be helpful. The first one is just this idea of crying out to God, just deluging Him with our tears and being willing to go there in our own emotions and our own sadness. We see this in Psalm 6, where David is saying, I'm weary with my moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with my weeping. That's Psalm 6:6. So that's the first thing. It's just being completely open and honest and crying and mourning the brokenness that's around us. The second aspect is asking God for help. And again, we see this in Psalm chapter 71, verse 12. Oh God, be not far from me. Oh God, oh my God, make haste to help me. So we come out of our tears with this idea that we're asking God, beseeching God to make things right. And then the third aspect is responding in trust and praise, that there's a sense of hope in the midst of this. Psalm 86:12. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever. So those of us who come from a biblical worldview, we often talk about we don't mourn without hope, that there's this sense of God is going to make all things right in the end. And even in the midst of our brokenness and crying and asking for help, we know how this will all end, where everything is as it's supposed to be. So the temporary trial and tribulation that we experience, while it seems hopeless, is truly just temporary, and we end up having hope in the end. So for me, I'm not somebody who's prone to lament personally. I want to be more in touch with my feelings. And as I've gotten older, that's happened, as things happen in your life and we've experienced all kinds of things, building a family or having joys that really spark my emotions, but then also tragedy and real sadness. So I found this three, steps or principles to be really helpful for me, and that I don't rush to trying to fix things in the midst of seeing things that are wrong.
Yeah, this is a direct callback to our last episode on EQ and this important role of empathy. Empathy is just so deeply embedded into this concept of lament. But, for me personally, like David, you talk about your own journey with this. For my journey, I feel like my upbringing, even within the church context, did not really equip me well to do this well. So on my learning journey of how I've tried to think about this and learn, Sun Chang Ra wrote a book called Prophetic Lament, A Call for Justice in Troubled Times. And he kind of unpacks lament there with kind of this idea of lament in the Bible as a liturgical response to the reality of suffering and engages God in the context of pain and trouble. And that the hope, like you talked about, the hope of lament is that God would respond to human suffering. And I think that really just, it encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about when we use this term. So I want to take it now, kind of now that we have this working definition that you've laid out for us in these 3 steps. They are clearly embedded in Scripture a lot more than maybe we maybe even realize, because you referenced just a couple Psalms, but I mean a good majority of the Psalms. I mean, we could list so many.
Yeah, as you're mentioning that, it's almost like through lament, we experience God's EQ.
Whoa, yeah.
Just him sitting with us in pain and mourning with us. And this idea of being completely known in our pain and sadness and mourning. And him not rushing to solutions, even though he offers the solution, the one solution that we need. He doesn't rush to it for us. So it's an interesting idea to think about God displaying EQ as we engage with lament.
Yeah, and just to prove the layers to this, I mean, thus far we've spent the majority of this talking about there. You could reach for examples on your phone of what's happening right now in our world and even in our local communities, things that don't even make the headlines necessarily nationally or globally. But we haven't even talked about the importance, like we have in our previous episodes, under the qualities of a just leader, of seeing the whole playing field, of knowing the role of history and being able to lament historical injustices that shape the present. So not just the injustice that's happening now, but the injustices that have happened that have made things be as broken as they are in current day. So can you talk about how important it is not just to lament what's happening today, but what happened yesterday and decades ago, even some centuries ago, and the role that plays in just leadership?
Yeah, so this is certainly a multifaceted conversation. We talk about this when we talk about the 4th quality of a just leader, taking bold and courageous action, and that action needs to be disruptive. And when we use the word disruptive, we talk about disrupting systems that have been developed over time because of historical injustices that have been baked into our experiences that create present injustices. And they come from our history. They come from historical things that have happened years, decades ago that were unjust and have then created the ways of doing things and outcomes that we experience today. And as just leaders, we've got to not overlook those. And again, our tendency is to rush to solutions to those things, but instead, what's a step to take to really lament that, particularly as it relates to people who today are experiencing the results of those injustices more acutely than maybe some of us are. How do we enter into a time where we cry to God ask for help, and respond with trust and praise, our hearts should break for the things that break God's heart. And this is core to what it means to see the whole playing field. And as we recognize that in our own history, it then causes us to recognize our own brokenness and the ways in which we fall short. And I'm really scared of being someone who's going to create injustice that people experience 50 years from now, or be a part of some unjust system that, my grandkids will say, well, what was Granddad David doing back in 2023? Didn't he see this? Wasn't he paying attention to
We're going
these
to work
things?
on your name. Granddad David, it takes too long. We're going to keep workshopping that. You got time.
Yeah, we got a little bit of time.
A little bit of time.
All that to say is we have to pay attention.
Yeah.
And not overlook these things. Not get defensive about them too, but enter into the brokenness and the sadness that have happened for years and generations that then are realized today.
One of the things I love about our Just Leadership groups, when we sit and we have this conversation around a table with business leaders, is really helping them integrate this, which can feel like it's a pretty abstract concept, how to practice lament and how to actually apply this to their work world so that it breaks through. And so at first, I think you have to do that by identifying what are the barriers to practicing this. What are the things that are keeping a business leader with everything that's on their plate from being able to even really engage with this conversation and be able to lean in well on this topic, David?
Yeah, well, first we got to be really careful not to rush to solutions. And again, be quick not to see, but we just want to fix something. That's in our DNA. And so we just see the brokenness, we're going to make it right.
Which can be an asset in some situations and may have led to excellence in some contexts, right? A big strength in a business context of being a fixer, not inverse happening here.
Absolutely. And, again, there are certain cases where action has to be quick and urgent. And so, as with everything we say,
qualifiers,
there's always nuance and there's always complexity.
Yes.
But it's just thinking that we're in control. We can fix it, or we're conditioned to always win and overcome. And we've got this. And to be honest, as Americans, we live in a triumphalistic society where it's all about winning. And we always win. And we overcome. And we're going to be the best. So we're conditioned, whether we like it or not, with those kinds of mentalities. And therefore, we need to be careful not to go down that road. It's hard for us to live in what I would call the in-between, or live in the brokenness when things are not resolved. It's hard for us to sit in sadness and just not want to get out of that space. Or, we want to avoid hard things and not push through it and deal with it well. Mourning is hard. Mourning is not maybe easy for us to do. It's not what we would think about. And it's also, we're a lot of times we're just too distant from the injustices.
Yeah.
They don't reach our radar, and they certainly don't reach our emotions if we're not close enough to what's going on. And so we can not be intentional about being close and get busy with all these other things and be completely unaware and insensitive to the things that people are going through, even the people that we've hired, even the people we see every day. And because we're in the context of work, we have no idea what they're dealing with because of even injustices that we could even be aware of that are going on around us that are near and dear to their heart.
Yeah, I think when you point out the fact that we want to rush to solutions because we're just always in a rush, period. And sometimes I think speed is a real enemy here.
Mm-hmm.
Of just when you're just going and you're just and you're in a culture that really glorifies busyness, and like the worst thing you could say as a business leader is, yeah, I've got time. When do you want to hang out? Like, I'm free. Like, I'm wide open. You pick. Right? Versus, it's a badge of honor to say, yeah, talk to me in 7 months. That's when I have an opening and I'll fill you in for 5 minutes. Like, that's you must be really important, right? It's so codified into our DNA, even in Western culture, American culture, that what you're describing requires moving at a different speed. It means downshifting your vehicle in ways that I think not only are really good for you to be able to practice this for others' sake, but are really even good for your own soul. And that's something that I've experienced, of having life downshift me at times, and then realizing, man, I'm really thankful that this has happened, because it really positions me to say, I think this was maybe the speed more in tune with the speed in which we were meant to drive in life. Because when I look at Jesus's ministry, even, I mean, it just was not the speed in which I think we have been accustomed to running here in the American business context.
Yeah, but Rob, that is so unrealistic.
Well, that's why it's good that it's a one-way conversation, David. We can just kind of pontificate here, and there's no pushback from the audience.
But you're right. I mean, I'm pushing back, right? Like,
Yeah,
that sounds great, Rob, but you don't know.
you don't know what I got on my plate.
With, and I can't drop these balls. There's just no way. And that's legit. So we don't mean to be trite with any of this. We are around this all the time, and we struggle with it ourselves. We just know that these are the things that God's laid out for us so that we can have life. Like, we're preaching to ourselves, because we have to remind ourselves that these are the things that there's a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow of this pathway that God offers to us, just like the other things that we've talked about before.
Yeah, it's for our own flourishing. And even I would encourage, if that is the response, right, is camping out with why is that my response, that I don't have time? Like, what is the driving truth that is popping into my head that might actually not be a truth? It might be a lie. What happens why couldn't I slow down? Which dovetails into an episode that we're going to hit later on in this series around this idea of slowing down, and how do we do that as we downshift the year. So we're going to come back to that. But David, let's flip the script here. We talked about what are the barriers to practicing lament. Where have you seen this done well? Because I think that having practical examples are just helpful to kind of bring this 10,000 feet down to the ground.
Well is an interesting way to say it. I would say that just doing something to taking a step is actually doing something well.
All right, we're gonna take that bar. We're gonna lower it. Yeah.
But where we've been really encouraged, I would say, when just the awful events around George Floyd took place, among many of the shootings and just the events that have really been troubling for so many of us. We found that helping our business leaders know what to say to their employees during a time like that was extremely important. And it wasn't something that they naturally knew that they needed to do, but it teed up for us conversations that we needed to have with them to help them see how important it is for them to speak in certain cases and say something, to know that people within their companies, within their networks, were really hurting and needed to have the leader say something about the issues and the events that had taken place. And we needed to also help them do that in an authentic way. And so many of them just really did that well. They took a risk. They took a step. They articulated things that were near and dear to their hearts. They didn't try to be someone they weren't. They didn't come with all the answers. They didn't come with solutions. They just articulated their own hurt, their own brokenness in an authentic way. And they created space for people within their companies to know that they're validated and that they're heard. And if there's need for space for that to happen within their context, they were open to that.
Mm.
So that was where we saw it happen well, and it was through just taking a step. You know, the challenge of this is, when do you say something and when do you not? There's brokenness.
But David, if I open up Pandora's box,
right.
Is it every headline every day? Is this what I do now? Am I a news anchor? Right?
Right.
Let me play devil's advocate here.
Do we post something on social media for this or that? And do I write a letter to our employees for every event? Like, depends. It's probably the answer to the question. Depends on your context. It depends on your employees. It depends on the severity of the event, or how deeply woven it is into our culture's experience, and or your own experience, and or the experience of your team, your people. Again, it's complex and nuanced.
Yes.
There's not a formula. It's sensing when you need to do that and when you don't necessarily need to do that.
Yeah.
Again, all that is, you have your radar up, you're attentive, you have margin to be able to know what the answer to that question is. If you're head down and so oblivious to everything around you, and don't realize the pain that even your own people are experiencing because of what's going on, then you'll really miss it.
It's like your metaphorical car, to go back to my analogy, needs to be moving slow enough where you can see the individual trees, versus it's just a blur.
Yeah, this is not a bullet train.
No, it's not. It's a slow moving. And you talk about that in your book, right? I mean, you take a sense of urgency to it, but you downshift to meet people where they are. And to, again, call back to last episode, creating a culture of belonging means you know your people and you know your community, and you know when you're going slow enough, and you're moving in ways in which these cries are reaching your ears. And then you're really sensing, when am I getting that nudge to do something maybe uncomfortable, but be honest and vulnerable to say something, because that's going to help my people feel a greater sense of belonging, make them feel like I see them. And that's all a part of leadership. And it's definitely all a part of just leadership. It's going back to EQ. And you're right. It depends is honestly, that is the most succinct, but also most powerful thing to say to this, because it is 100% accurate. It's not a prescription. It's not follow XYZ. I mean, by the time people even listen to this episode, we can't predict all the future scenarios that are going to be happening, right? I mean, you can't really even get ahead of these things. But so much of this goes back to a posture. So, David, as we think about the bottom line, what comes to mind for you when you think about that in terms of lament?
I would say it's hard and awkward at first, and that's okay. This is a muscle that a lot of us haven't built so much. And so as we get into it, it's going to feel weird. We might not know how to do it. It's something we need to practice. So I would just encourage those of you listening, use those 3 ideas at the beginning. We talked about crying out to God, asking for help, responding in trust and praise. It's sort of just a helpful framework as you think through this. Someone like me, if it feels manufactured sometimes, if I'm not really feeling it. But the more that we can engage with this, the more it will become natural. And then the second thing I would just say is, it all should be done under the banner of hope, and that this is not our home, and that we're made for another place for those of us who follow Jesus and believe in what he has for us, we will live in a world that works and everything is perfect. A new heavens and a new earth, and everything is going to be as it's supposed to be. And so these afflictions, this lamenting is temporary. It does not last forever. It will not last forever. And so we can engage with it under the banner of hope and a longing for the destination that we are assured of through our faith.
Yeah, there's no better way to end this episode, right? Is this idea that when we cry out for answers, we're not guaranteed to get them today or tomorrow or even in our lifetimes or this side of heaven, but that the answer is coming.
Yes.
And that there is an ultimate answer to all of the injustices that we lament, and that these wrongs will be righted one day, and that is the hope. That is the hope in Christ, which is, this is the season that we are upon, right? And that is the hope. That is the light that breaks into the darkness.
Yep. Very, very, very good news.
Yeah, and the justice, right, that He ushers in, that is His kingdom. So, wow, David, this is good, and I'm looking forward to the episodes ahead and as we continue to build off these themes. So, I appreciate you leaning in with me.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, thank you. To learn more about 1110 Leadership, visit our website at 1110leadership.com. That's the numerals 11, then spelled out TEN leadership.com. That's 11 TEN leadership.com. There you'll find more resources to equip you on the journey of becoming an 1110 leader. You can also get connected to our growing leadership network. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. To help others find us, you can also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.